were there, but it was only when they got alliances with the hardware manufacturers and the software producers about how to, oppose this also from a business point of view and a consumer point of view, that people started to listen. Because nobody, at least in the Nordic country, nobody gives a damn about liberties anymore. We are so Lutheran and so state-abiding that we feel that everything that the state is doing is right anyway.
Actually, you can find supporters on both the left and the right scale. This is...
Yeah, but on the fringes.
Actually, it's a straight line. There's been consensus about this, and there's no particular tie to economic policy. What is interesting, though, is your point about you can't get a mass vote about this, and you're right. You can never get a majority in Parliament on these issues, and we're not aiming for that either. We're aiming just to get into Parliament and get a wedge in between the two blocks of power. That means both blocks will need us in order to form a majority government. That means we get the privilege of sitting down and playing who wants to be Prime Minister. And the price of that will be a copyright reform and restoration of civil liberties.
Just a quick word to what you said. I'm not saying that government doesn't get involved in business. Obviously, they do. However, when the question gets posed to governments, should we preserve this existing business that has a huge impact on our GDP, or should we criminalize their competition, which is effectively what's happened, right? So Magnetron's business model is legal in America and not legal in Europe. So it's been criminalized effectively because collecting societies who have the force of law don't allow me to do a business I have in America. So that's the first point. The second is when you ask a government, should we support the existing model or another one, it's one thing to say, gosh, there's actually no business model we can imagine if the major labels vanished. Boy, that would be really terrible. But you know, there's this thing called Google, and if you type download music, you will find 100 companies with different business models that all want to compete. So all we're trying to do is allow capitalism to not favor the incumbents so that we can compete.
Yeah, small comments from there and then from you. So I work at the Danish Broadcaster, and we have Tele2 as our ISP. So if I want to access the Pirate Bay to read up on the blog what's going on in the case, I can't do so. My colleagues can do so. And I'm probably one of the more tech-savvy journalists there, but the rest of them won't know how to bypass that blog and do something about that. And I think this is a real problem. And I find certain dangers in this we ignore copyright, we're beyond copyright stance. Because I think it's maybe slightly elitist, and I think there's a big part of the population that hasn't even started to think about copyright. So this is a question for Rasmus Fleischer.
Yeah.
Let's go for the comment first.
Just a very small comment. I completely agree with you on that. I think another good indicator is, I'm a lawyer, so if you follow the lawyers, if you can see that they are beginning to soften up a little bit on this because there are so many clients that are paying them for advising them on new business models, then you can see it's going in the it's moving in the right direction.
And the best example right now is Pandora, that's about to fail. That has only been legal in America and never been legal to operate in Europe because of these strange governmental consortiums.
Okay.
Then Rasmus.
Yeah. Sure, true. I would like to put it this way. In terms of artistic possibilities, we must start think beyond copyright. We can't be stuck in like regulating who will be able to copy it or not, because everyone will be able to copy it, the digitalized version. Then in terms of freedom of communications and the fight against censorship and so on, we are obviously not beyond copyright. Their copyright is extremely, it's a threat. And I think the question about copyright should be very much focused on exactly these questions about censorship, about the fight against tools, against indexes, rather than be put in terms of a consumer's right to access stuff, because they will access it.
Also, I want to point out to Henrik that someone needs to push the envelope a bit, and we need to push towards that direction in order to get some people moving with us. So even maybe sometimes we go too far, and maybe sometimes we want to go even further than we actually can, but someone needs to take it that direction, and that's what we've been doing all the time. And even though, as I said, maybe we go too far sometimes, at least we get some people going in our direction, which is a very important thing, and that's maybe the leastest thing, but it's effective.
Carl.
Yeah, I think the goal doesn't necessarily have to be to abolish copyright altogether. I know that there are lots of libertarian, mostly economists, who think that copyright and patent and so on are actually not beneficial institutions and should be abolished. But I mean, to get through this crisis, if we want to see it as a crisis, with this widening gap between harsh enforcement and citizens who don't believe in the law, I mean, all we really need to do is add a few exceptions or extend the exceptions we're having in copyright law to allow non-commercial file sharing or sharing of copying material. I also think we're never going to get the government out of the market altogether. I mean, it's self-evident that we have a government that needs to, in some cases, enforce contracts. And so what I think we should do, which I interpret Rasmus that way too, is we should state these are the values that we need to uphold when we enforce copyright. We cannot enforce it in a way that takes away the freedom of speech, freedom of information, personal integrity, right to privacy, and so on. And probably, in effect, that's going to mean that people can keep downloading copyrighted material illegally, because you need pretty harsh enforcement if you want to stop it. So it's just, you know. But what's important is to just realize there's something on the other side of the scale that needs to be valued as well.
I have a question here.
Yes, I'm a system administrator of 2 BitTorrent trackers, and we only allow DVD on our trackers. And we had a big thread a few years ago, still ongoing, about if you should buy the DVD or not. And we noticed that many people, because it is illegal to download, they think that they feel better if they buy the DVD after they've seen it, and well, they feel better if they buy a lot of movies. And I know that our users are very good consumers as well, because they love movies, and the more they download, the more they buy. And if we would abolish copyright, do you think that people would buy less movies than music?
Okay, so if the question was if the halo effect of sort of piracy or that disappears, will that actually downscale sales? This is something I guess.
Yeah,
John
there was a very large study that happened in the UK, I think about 6 months ago, that studied file sharing and its impact on purchasing. And what they found was there was essentially no change overall, plus or minus. But what they did find was that the people who were the heavy music buyers, which I believe is something like £40 a month or something like that, those are the core audience, those people were also the heaviest piracy users. So that was something that was very interesting, is the people who are compulsive music buyers are also the most active at downloading illegally. So right now it looks like a wash. However, you have to think about scale, which is right now that's the case. How would that devalue or change things? And that's where there's a lot of fear, because there's so much money involved.
Yeah, but copyright can be used as a recommendation.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, what I'd like to frankly just see is, I just think that the old dinosaurs should just go away, and we should just legalize and allow the new young Turks to come in and hurt them economically by just outcompeting.
Yeah, that was essentially, you essentially made my point for me here in the last sentence. You're asking, how does file sharing hurt profits today? Well, that's essentially irrelevant, because the business models are going to be completely changed 5 years down the road. However, and this is a very important point, people I know are very, very annoyed that pirates are considered non-consumers, because it's simply so far from the truth that it's silly. I know people have whole shelves full of books and movies they downloaded, looked at, and simply used file sharing as a consumer tool, if you like. See, like you take a car out for a test drive. But like I said, that's not going to be so much relevant 5 years down the road because the business models will have to have changed. And that